And we are live. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are here with the lovely Elizabeth now. How am I pronouncing your surname? Shall I let you introduce yourself properly?
Okay, thanks, Sam. Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Ducie.
And tell us a little bit about the books that we're going to talk about, the main books we're going to talk about tonight, because I have a feeling we're going to dig deep.
We're going to move around a bit. Yes, I'm one of these people that was never quite sure what genre I wanted to write in, and in fact, to start with, I didn't even realise there was such a thing as genre. So I've sort of meandered a bit, but at the moment, I'm writing cozy crime set in a fictional village in Devon, and I've got 3 books in the series so far. So I thought we're probably going to talk mainly about the first one, which is Murder at Mountjoy Manor. But because I've invented the village and I've got all sorts of characters who appear in more than one book, I also write short stories based in the village. They're not murder stories. They're a complete mixture. You know, some happy, some sad, some funny, some not. But they're sort of just to give people a background flavour of the village. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Sorry, why did you decide to go with a fictionalised version? Devon, I absolutely love. I spent a lot of time in Devon as a child. You know, family holidays every year, camping in Devon was one of my absolute highlights, one of my favourite places in the world.
Yeah.
Did it feel a bit safer to use a fictionalised version?
Well, it was because I'm a townie. I mean, I'm a city girl. I was born in Birmingham, and I left Birmingham to study in London, and then we moved to a sort of quite a large town in Kent. So until 16 years ago, till we moved down here to Devon, I'd never lived in essentially a sort of a rural community. It's a very small town that I live in, and it's right on the edge of the moors and not far from the sea. It's a beautiful location. As you say, there's some lovely places down here in Devon. Living in a small community is very different from living in a city or a large town. And I realised that I wanted to write about living in that sort of community. But I didn't want to get run out of town in the process. So I thought, if I invent a village, and I studied the maps and I identified an area a couple of miles up the road from the town I live in, which is called Chudley. And there's a pub there. And I've set this fictional village around the pub. And that allows me the best of both worlds, because one of the bodies is found in the local country park, and I can talk about going to Exeter or Newton Abbot, or even using the cafe in Chudley. So I can use real locations, but I can fictionalize the bits that I need to.
We have got lots of hellos already. So hello to everyone who's already joined us. Kaz is currently, she said, thanks to me for standing in. She's still on the train. So Kaz is on her way back from London, from the House of Commons.
Yes, she's said she's talking to MPs today, isn't she?
Yeah. So I'm sure she'll tell us all about that. Lots of comments about how lovely Devon is. Kaz really enjoyed book 1 in the series, and she was going to ask if the village was fictional. Is there a real village similar to it? So you just touched on the fact that there are some places that you've loosely based it on.
Yes, the pub is based on a real pub, and the church, there are elements of Chudley Church in the Coomsford Church. So I draw on real locations, but fictionalize most of it.
Shall we talk a little bit about what the book's about? I'm aware that we don't want to give any spoilers, but there is so much going on. I feel like we can talk about things without giving things away.
Yeah. Well, if I talk about the murder side of it first, Simon Mountjoy is he's a local boy made good. He left the village and went to London when he was quite young. Joined a company, stayed with it, ended up as a director of the company. So he made a lot of money. He's come back to the village and he's bought Mountjoy Manor, which was in his family at some point in the past, but it got lost, and now he's bought it back again. And certainly Mountjoy Manor, I've modelled on a number of sort of country houses that go through that sort of profile of being in use and not in use, and then back again. And he's renovated. He spent 13 years renovating it, and it's just about finished. And when the book starts, he has a film crew down filming it, doing a documentary, a sort of a grand designs type documentary about the project and about the house. So he's done a lot of good for the village. You know, he's renovated his house. He's brought employment in, but he has a knack of rubbing people up the wrong way, and he's upset quite a few people. So it's not a huge surprise to everybody when he's actually found at the bottom of the waterfall at the back of the pub, having been knocked out by someone and gone over the edge. So, and that's where, in fact, I actually open with the prologue, which is where the body is found, and then I go back about 8 days and have various scenes. So we see him with different people. So we get to know the tensions and who the suspects are.
That was something that I was going to point out, that is not a spoiler. This is literally the opening. I read on Kindle, so either the opening page or the second page, but the prologue, and yes, they're all short, snappy chapters. You know, we are flying through this book because there is so much going on, and it's just, yeah, the pace of it is spectacularly good.
Thank you. I mean, I'm like all of us. I'm an avid reader, and I do a lot of my reading in bed, and I love short chapters. You know, James Patterson is the master of it. Some of his chapters are only half a page long, and it's great. But if you have the right cliffhanger at the end of the chapter, then there's always the desire to read just another.
Absolutely. I actually wrote down a cast of characters who all have a motive, and at the very least think they'll be pleased if Simon dies. So yes, nobody really likes him. Well, some people like him, but then maybe they shouldn't really like him.
Yes.
I mean, you've drawn him beautifully.
Oh, thank you. I mean, one of the things, I'm a great fan of Midsummer Murders. I mean, I know Midsummer Murders is a police procedural rather than amateur sleuths, but to me, it's a classic cozy crime in all other ways. And you know from the beginning which person is going to be murdered, because they're always the most unpleasant one in the cast of characters. And I do tend to make my murder victims unpleasant, so that there's not too much angst over the fact that they've been killed.
Which works so well for a cozy, because you really don't want to be upset about the person that died. You want to be maybe not ambivalent, but you know, you don't really want to be focusing on them. You want to know who did hate them just enough. Yes. And what have they done? Yeah. And what flips people over the edge, because so many times the suspects are, they can be really nice people, and very often there isn't a good reason. There's never a good reason for murder, but there's an understandable reason. Put it that way. Yeah, I think there are things that we would all think, yeah, you know, okay, I can understand that. We can let that go. That's realistic and reasonable. That's okay. I think this might be Kaz again. Yeah, it is. Simon is really quite an unpleasant character, as are some of the others in the series, in the way you want a literary character to be unpleasant, which she's basically agreeing with what we've just said, that, you know, you don't want, in some other stories, you want the power of the emotion. You know, that's what drives you forward. I like the fact that in your cozy mysteries, that isn't the case. Because, to be honest, if I'm reading a cozy, I don't really want to be really
to
feeling it. Yeah, I just want to go along with it and really enjoy it.
Story, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, and I am thrilled to discover this, just before we went live, that some of the characters have been in thrillers that you've written,
Yes.
which will be my first port of call after this interview. How I've missed that, I don't know. So tell me a bit about what I'm going to find, she says, rubbing her hands together with glee.
Well, if I go back into before I started writing fiction, which I started in 2006, I spent 30 years in the international pharmaceutical industry as a technical consultant and writer. So I've written millions of words, but they were all true, pretty much. And when I first started writing fiction, I was writing, as we all do, I was writing what I knew. So I wrote, I started off with a 6,000 word short story set in Africa about counterfeit medicines. And that 6,000 word story grew first of all into a novel called Counterfeit, and then it ended up as a trilogy with Counterfeit, Deception and Corruption. And each one of them is a standalone story, but they have an overarching theme that goes, there's one storyline that goes all the way through. We mentioned James Patterson a few minutes ago. His Women's Murder Club series, I've always enjoyed, and I love the idea of a group of strong female protagonists. And the way he does it, he has 4, and a different one takes a lead in each book. So when I started the thrillers, I had 3 strong women. Suzanne Jones, who was she was an inspector in the medicines industry. She wasn't me, but she was closest to my experience, put it that way. She has a sister called Charlie, who has got a bit of a shady past and was a bit of a tearaway. And then they have a friend called Francine Matheson, who is an MP. And the 3 of them take the lead in each of those thrillers. I started writing those thrillers back, I wrote the short story back in about 2012. And the last book in the series came out in 2017, I think it was, or 2018. By which time I've had those characters in my head for so long, I really needed to get rid of them. So I took a year off to write non-fiction while I was working out what I was going to do next.
That's a really clever way of doing it.
Well, it didn't quite work because I had this idea I was going to do a really complex time slip set in Russia, because I did a lot of work over there in lots of different locations. And halfway through the year, I thought, I'm bored. And if I'm bored, my readers are going to be bored. I want to write something that's fun, which is where the cozies came from. But the characters wouldn't go, and Charlie in particular wouldn't go, wouldn't leave my head. And somebody said to me one day, you've put so much work into her, it would be a pity. It's a pity that we're going to lose her. So I took her and her partner, Annie, and their daughter, Susie, from London, retired them to Devon, where they bought a pub. And they now run the village pub in Coombsford. And of course, the pub is the hub of the village, so you get all sorts of gossiping. You can pick everything up. And so in Mountjoy, they are the 2 main. They're the amateur sleuths, and they have a friend called Rowan Banerjee, who is a former police officer who's now a detective and a private detective. And he works with the 2 of them, and they form the group of amateurs. The group of sleuths. So that's where the characters have come from.
And what a great set of characters they are. We've just had a good evening that's Malcolm Hollandrake. Good evening, Malcolm. Who I will just give a quick congratulations to, signed a new contract with his publisher. So.
Excellent.
Cheers to you, Malcolm. Fantastic news. I would like to ask you about your path to publication, because you've decided to self-publish. I
did, yes.
What made you go that route rather than a traditional route or a hybrid?
Right. Well, I'm sort of hybrid, because I've been published traditionally since 2002, I've got a whole raft of pharmaceutical textbooks, but they're under my real name. Not Elizabeth Ducie is a pen name, and they're written under my real name. So I have some experience of the traditional industry, albeit it's only ever been a direct relationship between me and the publisher. I've never had an agent, because for non-fiction I didn't need it. But when I started writing creatively, I started with short stories before I did anything else. And back in 2011, a good friend of mine and I were sitting down writing our New Year's resolutions, our writing resolutions. And we said we wanted to be out there sometime that year. And we were both writing short stories, and we knew that the chances of getting a book of short stories by two completely unknown authors published was zilch. There was no chance at all. So, and this was 2011. We were just, Kindle and KDP and that was just starting to take off. So we put a book of short stories out in 2011, and we did another one in 2012. And my friend decided she didn't like the self-publishing route, and she's sort of working her way around through the traditional route. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've got a business background. I love the whole the technology and the I mean, I'm not that good at marketing. It's the hardest bit of it all, but I just love the whole thing, and I love the spreadsheets and the graphs and the whole business side of it. So by the time I got ready to publish my first novel, which was Gorgito's Ice Rink, which is this is the one where I had no idea what about genre, and it's sort of historical, contemporary, romance, quest. It's a real mix. I did send it off to a couple of agents, and I got some callback and that. But the more I thought about it, I'd spent 3 years by then learning about publishing, self-publishing, and also I'm towards the back end of my career, let's put it that way, and I did not want. I'm too old to work for anybody else. I've been a consultant for years. I don't work well in a formal structure, and I thought, no, I'm going to put the first novel out as an indie and see what happens. And it came out in 2014, and in 2015 it was runner-up in the Self-Published Book of the Year Awards here in the UK. And I thought that vindicated my decision. And I've never looked back from there. And I've just published novel number 7. I've got 5 books of short stories and a whole series of manuals on business studies for authors. I'm a control freak. I just like being able to do it myself.
Is there anything that you wish you'd known when you started that would have maybe made it a little easier? For anybody who's watching, who's wondering which route to take.
I wish I'd known how to get the first novel out in less than 8 years. But on the other hand, because I started writing it in 2006 and it came out in 2014. But having said that, KDP probably wouldn't have been developed so well. So I mean, one thing I would say, which I have learned as I've gone along, and I believe passionately, if somebody picks up one of my books, I mean, I had a guy once who worked for Waterstones, where I was in a book fair at a literary festival, and he picked up Ice Rink, which, as I say, had just won the award, and he said, "Oh, it looks like a proper book." And I didn't know whether to kiss him or hit him, because, and that's
I understand that feeling completely.
And I mean, that's one of the things I believe passionately. There are times when you pick up a book and you look at it and it has been self-published, and not in a good way, if you know what I mean. And I believe passionately that whatever way the book is published, whatever route you use for publishing, it still should have the same quality. It should have the same covers, etc. It's the same professionalism about it. So it shouldn't look any different. The same requirements are there. It's just who is responsible for doing it, or who is responsible for making sure that it's done.
Kaz, I believe, has said, does the pharmacology experience help with the murder plots? And secondly, do you ever get asked to be a science expert for other authors? Also, kudos for being a woman in STEM.
Thank you. Yes, I've of course, working in Russia, I've worked with an awful lot of quite senior women in STEM, and in fact in the Middle East as well. It's been I've worked with some wonderful women there around the world. Yeah, the pharmaceutical side, it helps a little bit. When I first started, because the first book is actually set in a pharmaceutical factory, there's a pharmaceutical factory in the background, and I wasn't sure whether to put details in or not. And I was sort of just putting in tiny little bits of detail, because of course I knew it all. I knew all the detail anyway, so I knew the background to it, and I didn't want to bore people with lots and lots of technical details. And people started saying to me, we need more details. We need to know a little more. We need to understand more. So I put more in there. Certainly, yes. In the latest one, I've got a poisoning, and I knew the basic. I went to, I used Brian Price's book because I saw him speak at Swanwick, and I actually used his book to eliminate a whole load of poisons, and then did a bit more research to find the one I wanted. So yes, it does help from that point of view. I do occasionally get asked for advice on it, but not that much. No.
Interesting. I was going to ask if you've used any advisors for your own books, and Brian is a fan favourite of the UKCBC.
Yes.
Saved many authors' blushes, so it's always nice when his name comes up in conversation. Yes. He's definitely, yeah. We have a lot of fun with Brian when he's on. There are a lot of things that he won't tell us, which is good.
Oh, I understand. Yes, and I have a friend who's in Exeter Writers with me, Richard Handy, who is on the forensic side, and he also, he gave us a terrific presentation recently about how the crime scene and all the things you do with that, because that's a side that I haven't really used in the books because it's all amateur sleuths. And he also said, yes, the things I can't tell you, I'm not. But I know every time I see an explosion on television, the classic thing where there's an explosion and the characters throw themselves on the ground. I always say to my husband, Brian would say that wouldn't work. They'd be dead.
It's such a tricky balance, isn't it? Because you want it to be, you want an explosion to be explosive. You want these scenes to be this really wonderful thing that really grips the audience, and there has to be a line between fact and fiction.
Yes,
but where do you draw the line when the scene is so good? Myself and Graham Bartlett have had conversations a lot, and Brian and Graham work together. Graham's the police advisor, and we've had lots of conversations about certain TV shows that I'm not going to name because he's not here, so I don't have to, that he can't watch because it's so inaccurate. To me, if it's entertaining, I don't really care, but I can understand why he would find that so infuriating.
No, I can understand it as well. And in fact, I saw one, because I know Brian I know Graham rather through Swanwick as well. And I saw something he did recently about the fact that these days the DCI and the DI don't go to the crime scene. They're stuck behind a desk. And I have but you know, you look at all the major crime shows and the books, and it is always the DCI or the DI who's doing anything. So what I did in my first couple of books, I had a DI, and I've sort of now promoted her and sent her elsewhere in the country, and I've given the sergeant a larger role, and brought the detective constable in as well. So I'm sort of trying to be a bit more realistic about it, but I am conscious of the fact that, you know, if you look at all the popular writers there, it's all, you know, it's all at a higher level.
That's a really clever way of moving it into kind of current times. I wouldn't have thought of that. I've not read that, as far as I'm aware, in anybody else's books. And obviously I read a lot. I think it's a really clever way of doing it.
Well, and I'm just going to have to hope that my sergeant doesn't get too ambitious and doesn't want to get promoted, because if he does, he's going to have to move on and do another book.
Well, then you can just bring somebody else in. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And I have, talking about advisors, I also have somebody who lives around the corner from me who is a police officer, and I've started talking to him more about it, because one of the things I'm conscious with books where you've got amateur sleuths, if you go back to the sort of the golden age books, the 20s and 30s or what have you, you could actually get away with the, you know, Miss Marple, she was able to get away with all sorts of things without the police throwing her off site or whatever. Today, it's much harder to do that, and there, I am aware that there are some places where I have to bring the police in, because it is. I mean, I agree with you that fiction doesn't have to be completely realistic, but there are some places where, you know, there would have to be a police presence, so I have to bring them in. So I use my friend Alex for questions on that.
Sarah is asking one of her current favourite questions, I would say. What would your Google searches say about you?
Yes, they would suggest that I was looking to poison somebody. It would be to do with things like ways of killing people. Also, I do quite a lot of searches to help with my character studies and things like that. So that it's not so. I'm not so worried about my Google searches, but I've done 2 sessions recently where I've had an interactive thing where we've been planning a murder, and I found myself twice just about to type on Facebook, come along on Saturday and help me plan my next murder, and realised if I put that out, I'll probably get thrown off Facebook.
Quite possibly, yeah. Do have yourself a backup page just for
Yes.
all such eventualities. It's really tickled me, Sarah, asking that. You are a very, very busy woman, as I found in my research. One of the things that I've noticed is that you have been doing, for want of a better word, taking part in, would be better, NaNoWriMo.
Yes. Yes.
So was this your first year? Is this a new thing to you? Is this something you do and have done for a while?
I have succeeded at NaNoWriMo for the last 10 years.
I'll just say, for anyone who doesn't know, it's National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo. So we can drop a link into the group for next year, but sorry. I thought I'd better explain what it is.
Yeah, it's a challenge which writers around the world take part in, to write 50,000 words in 30 days, which sounds horrendous, but it's 1,667 words, which really isn't, if you know what you're going to write, and if you bear in mind it's the first draft, so it can be complete rubbish. Editing is what makes it readable. The first draft is just to get the words down. And the original idea was that you wrote the first draft of your novel in November. I have drafted all my novels using NaNoWriMo. I always say to people, I write in November, and then I edit. I take December off, and then I edit from January through probably till about June, July, and then do the pre-launch and launch in October. So I've sort of got a nice annual cycle running. But this year there's been all sorts of, it's been a strange year for one way or another. And I've got the 4th cozy started, but I've also, bearing in mind I said my thrillers were a trilogy, I've also got the 4th in that trilogy, which I've started work on. So I've got 2 of them running in parallel, plus I'm writing character studies. So this year, it's going to be 50,000 words, but it's a mix of words. And I'm at 40, just under 43,000 at the moment.
Wow.
We have to finish by Thursday, and I'm aiming to finish on Wednesday.
I wrote a page at the beginning of the month, and I've read that page a couple of times, and that's been it. This was not my year.
No.
So you say that you're going to take December off, but
Yeah.
I also found in my research that you've got at least 2 events planned, and and how much do you really manage to take off in December?
I don't do any writing. I don't do any editing. I've got. I'm the editor. I don't know if you picked up. I'm the editor of Chudley Phoenix, which is our town's community magazine. I've been editing that for 14 years, and December is my last one. It's taken me a year. I told them in January I was stepping down. I mean, there's nobody for me to step down from because I pretty much started it with my friend in the first place. But I told the town I wasn't going to do it after December, and we've got a new person that appeared last month, so she's taking it over. But that will take me about 3 days to do. Yes, I've got a Christmas market which is running from the 30th of November to the 2nd of December, just 3 days. And I've got the Christmas fair in our town, which is 3 hours of absolute delight when the children process and the lights go on and people come and buy stuff from the stalls and that. But that's it. And well, at the end of the month, my monthly blog and my readers newsletter will basically be, that's all, folks. Have a good Christmas. See you in January. And so I do pretty much take the month off. I never start my Christmas preparations until I finish NaNoWriMo. So I haven't bought any Christmas cards. I haven't done anything. And so December is my playtime, apart from the bits and pieces I do.
With the bits and pieces that we were talking about, they sound like really good research for cozy crime.
Yes. There's quite a few things I do that are quite get used in various ways.
It just sounds like such a fun thing that the activities that you're taking part in could be used.
Well, certainly I've my husband's on the town council, and I've sort of had in my mind that at some point a bit further down the line we'll have one where one of the councillors gets offed, and we've the one I'm number 4, the one I'm working on at the moment is slaughter at the summer social, and that's a dead body that's found in the middle of the fete. So yeah, there's endless possibilities.
I'm assuming if you go to visit where your husband works for research, you got to be careful about not taking certain notebooks with you, and maybe do most of the writing after your visit.
Oh yes, I wouldn't do it while yes.
Kaz has said explosions on TV are normally a type of pyrotechnic called a concussion. Well, you learn something new every day.
Yes, yeah.
I may well have been told that before and forgotten, but it must be a fascinating job, though, working in pyrotechnics on TV.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Can't even imagine where I'd begin with that. We have talked a little bit about the current series and the thrillers involving some characters that are in this series. What about future books? I assume you're going to continue with the Cozy Coomsford books for a while.
I am, but as I said, the one I'm doing at the moment is I like alliteration. So I've got Murder at Mountjoy Manor, I've got Villainy at the Village Store, and I've got Calamity at Coomsford Church. Those are the three that are already out. Number 4 is Slaughter at the Summer Social,
which is just a genius title. They're all great. Yeah, that's just brilliant.
I was going to call it Slaughter at the Summer Spectacular, but the trouble is we do call our summer festival here in town a Summer Spectacular. So I thought, no, perhaps not such a good idea. So that's the 4th one, and I've got at least 2 other ideas for future ones. There's always the sort of the Midsummer Murders issue, that just how many dead bodies can one village take?
Apparently 11 billion.
Well, yeah. So I might I'll move them out a little bit. But I mentioned also that the 4th one in the thriller, and I think chronologically that's got to come before the 4th cozy. And the reason for that is I'm a scientist, and I tend to sort of set dates very carefully. So all my books are dated. The thrillers, the first thriller, Counterfeit, is set in I think it's 2004, something like that. It's way back. Partly because when I was writing them, I realized that if you write a thriller today, you have to answer questions like, well, when your hero or heroine gets into a tight spot, why don't they just use their mobile phone to get out of the problem? By setting it in Africa in 2004, it gave me a little more leeway. So those characters I think they were in their 40s in 2004. Moving forward, the cozies are set now in current day, and Charlie Jones, who was in her 40s back in the African series, is now approaching her 60s, and she's getting a bit old to be, she's beginning to feel her age a little bit. And what I'm trying to do is I've got Rowan, and I've got another a woman who's working together with him, and I want to move Charlie and Annie to be slightly still in the books, but not the main sleuths, and I want to move it to the younger generation. And if I keep it going long enough, at some point Charlie and Annie's daughter will be old enough that she can come in as well. So I need to do that last thriller one. Because that I always write the opening scene, the pivotal scene first, and I've had that scene in my mind for several years now. Charlie and Annie have been together for many years, but they're not married, and they're getting married at the beginning of this next book, and at their wedding reception, Charlie is arrested for murder, and because it's a cut and dry, obviously she's been framed, but because it's a cut and dried case, the police won't consider any options, and everybody else, all the amateurs, have to try and work out what's happened. Because of her background in the Secret Service and all the international stuff she's done, when I was plotting it all out, and I started it as a cozy, and I got it about 7 or 8 chapters in, and I said to my husband, this doesn't work as a cozy. This is actually the final part of the thrillers, and it's sort of putting an end to Charlie's story. So that will come next, and then the 4th cozy, possibly both next year. We'll see. I'm very good at setting targets for myself.
Do you worry about the idea of potentially killing off one of the main characters? I know lots of authors do it, and I know some are contractually not allowed to do it if it's a main character in a long-running series, for example.
Yeah.
But because you're in complete control, do you ever feel like, you know, I can literally do what I want, but I still have to balance it with hoping that the readers will continue if I kill somebody off?
I haven't thought that far ahead yet with these, because all I've thought about is, as I say, moving them sideways, but they'll still be there. But having said that, Gorgito's Ice Rink, which, as I said, was the first one I wrote, the opening scene there was Gorgito's funeral. So right front and center, I told my readers that the eponymous character in the title didn't survive to the end of the book. And I, you know, see people said to me, well, that's quite brave. But the aim then was to get people to see what happened and why you got to that stage. So yeah, I've done it before with Gorgito, but then he was a new character to everybody, so it wasn't quite the same. I don't know. I mean, I have actually, in the thrillers, there are some of the main characters have died. So I have done it before. Cozies are a bit different, aren't they? Because you need to, you know, everybody needs a nice warm feeling when they're reading a cozy.
Yeah, we talked about the idea that nobody was too bothered when Simon was murdered because he was, and again, if you've just tuned in, it happens right at the beginning, so no spoilers from us. We talked about the fact that you want your villain to be unlikable. You know, you want them to be universally hated, even. But on the flip side of that, you must have to be so careful that the other characters are really warm and friendly. As Kaz said, there are some unlikable characters as well, which I think is a good balance. But you want the ones that people feel like they're sitting down with their friends when they open one of your books.
Yes, I would certainly that with the sleuths that we now have the group of four. I mean, everybody has flaws. You can't have everyone being absolutely perfect, but I would be hesitant about doing anything to change people's views of those four. Notwithstanding the fact that I've just said Charlie would be arrested for murder, but we all know that she hasn't done it, so that's a different one. But the suspects, they need to be normal human beings. They need to have flaws, good sides and bad sides. I wrote. I was doing a character study earlier this week, and I started off with a picture of somebody, and I had it completely set in my mind that this guy was. He was not only was he going to be the suspect, he was going to be the murderer. And I was quite convinced he was definitely a wrong 'un. By the time I'd finished writing the character study, he had persuaded me that he was actually quite a nice person. He was good to his family. He was kind to animals. There was no way on earth he would ever consider killing anybody. I haven't quite decided yet whether he's lying to me or not. So the jury's out as to he will definitely be in there as a suspect in one of the books, but whether he turns out to be the murderer or not, I don't know yet. He hasn't told me.
You were saying earlier on that although you are really busy and you do lots of things, you were worried that the marketing wasn't as strong as it could be. But it seems to me you do an awful lot to promote your books and to support other authors. You know, there was a lot for me to look through when I was doing some research on you over the weekend. There's an awful lot there. I think you are doing a tremendous job.
Oh, thank you. I have always been a good networker. I've got quite a wide network, both locally face to face and online. And in fact, I've done a lot of work in the last 3 or 4 years with the American market. So I've got quite a strong network there. And I try to support other authors as much as I can. I think when I first start, or for the first few years, the perceived wisdom, if you looked at people like Mark Dawson and Joanna Penn and all the sort of the bigger self-published authors, they always said, you know, your ebook sales will be much bigger than your paperback sales. And I was thinking, well, I don't get that, because I'm bucking the trend. I'm selling more paperbacks face to face than I'm selling ebooks. But what that actually meant was I was doing my promotion of my paperbacks. I wasn't doing enough promotion of the ebooks, and that's what the last few years I've been working hard on that. And I now have the balance the balance has changed. The ebooks are now higher than the paperbacks from that point of view. But it's, you know, every time we think we understand the algorithm, we either don't or they change it. You know, it's, and I think was it Henry Ford who said only 50% of my advertising budget works, but the trouble is I don't know which 50% it is. You know, we do so much in the way of promotion, but I don't think we're never completely clear on which. I know some bits I know don't work. If I try something and it doesn't work, I don't bother to go back and do it again. But working out exactly what does work is a bit harder, I think.
Yeah, and the fact that things change all the time doesn't help at all, like you said.
Absolutely.
I'd like to go back to your short story collections. So, can you tell us a bit about the kind of stories, the genres that people will find in them? And we'll do a post later with some links and things for people to go and look at.
I do a monthly newsletter to my readers list, and I put a short story out as a free gift with each of those newsletters. And I got quite a lot of stories on file from when I used to write them, or they might have been a winner in a tiny obscure competition somewhere years ago. But also one year, I think the very first year I did NaNoWriMo, I couldn't conceive of writing a piece of work that was 50,000 words long. So I did 25 2,000-word stories in the month.
Wow.
So I had this wonderful back catalogue of short stories. So I did them. I started putting them out on my readers' newsletter, and then I thought, but it would be nice to be able to sort of leverage that and use at the end of the year, put them together as a collection and put them out online. So then I thought, well, why don't I start adapting them so that they fit in with the village? So they are, I mean, as I say, most of them, a lot of the stuff I write is light-hearted. There's one or two that are a bit poignant and might bring a tear to your eye, but they're mostly sort of they're sort of women's magazine type stories. You know, as I say, they're not crime stories as such, but some of the characters from the novels appear in the stories. Some of the characters in the stories will appear in later novels. So it's just a way of building up the world. And again, because I like alliteration, they're called Coomsford Calendar. These are my author copies, but that's Coomsford Calendar 1, Coomsford Calendar 2, and you won't be surprised to hear that in April I'm bringing out Coomsford Calendar 3. And they just go, each one, because I started doing it in April, each calendar runs from April to March.
It just sounds like such a great idea to do that. And I have never heard of anybody using NaNoWriMo for 25 2,000 word short stories. Maybe that's where I've gone wrong.
Well, it was, I needed something to get me. I wanted to.
Yeah.
I tried it years before. I think I tried it back in about 2007, and when I was starting my first novel, and I wrote the first 6,000 words, and then I stopped. And those 6,000 words I polished and changed and did all sorts of things for the next 2 or 3 years before I did anything with them. So I wanted to do Nano, but I as I say, I knew I couldn't do a full piece. And I had 3 little plastic bags, one with names, one with professions, and one with an emotion or something more abstract. And I took one from each bag. And what I would do is when I'd finished the day's story, I would take the next set out, and then that would give me 24 hours to sort of incubate the ideas. And then I'd sit down and write the story the next morning. But don't forget, I am quite happy at the idea of writing rubbish. So I certainly don't aim for it to be anything like readable by the end of of November. It's just an exercise in getting the words down and switching the editorial hat off.
Which begs the question, were you able to use all 25 eventually after more work?
Yes, I think some of them went in competitions. Most of them, because I'm now well on the way to having 36 short stories in the Coombsford calendars. So yeah, I've used I think there's about 2 I haven't used, and I'll get to them at some point.
Fantastic. I have to ask, what can you fit into 2,000 words in a short story? Did they all stay at around 2,000 words, or did you expand them?
Most of them stayed around the 2,000, because if you think about a lot of women's magazine stories, they will either have a one page is about 700 or something words, 2 pages is about 1,600 words, I think, something like that. And a lot of the competitions are 2,000 words maximum. Occasionally 2,500 or 3,000, but no, I've always, because I was when I was a technical writer, I also edited. I've always been able to cut stuff right down. I took a story of 2,000 words and edited it down to 1,000 words without losing any of the sense of the story.
Having read this, I can absolutely imagine that is true, because there isn't a word wasted. You know, there was a debate in, I believe it was in the group a few days ago about padding. There is no padding. There is not a single word wasted in this. That is why we can fly through them so quickly. And these ones are shorter as well, aren't they?
Yeah, they're only
160.
No, that one, oh sorry, 160 pages. Yes, sorry, I do it in words. That's 40,000. The second one's 45, and this latest one I think is about 47. So I'm getting a bit more wordy. I need to cut them back a bit.
I still think that there's probably not a word wasted in the 2 that I haven't read yet, that I will be reading. I was saying to my husband earlier, I think these are going to be, if my mum's watching, close your ears, mother. I think these are going to be an ideal Christmas present for my mum, because she really likes cosy books. She wasn't a big fan of cozy crime, but I've sent her several authors over the years. I've given her for Christmas several authors over the years, and she's okay with it now. If they're not gory, she's okay with it. So I think she'll really love these, especially with them being set in Devon. I think this is going to be a really nice gift for her. So thank you, making Christmas shopping a bit easier this year. We have got 2 minutes left. This hour has absolutely flown. Would you like to give everyone a recap of the Coombsford series?
Okay.
And anything else at all that you'd like to tell us about, please, feel free.
Okay, well, the Coomsford series of cozy crime is Murder at Mountjoy Manor, which is the first one, Villainy at the Village Store, and then Calamity at Coomsford Church, which is the one that came out last month. All my murder victims are deserving victims, and I follow the cozy rules of no violence on the page, no children or animals harmed, and the murder gets solved in the end. And then the thrillers are they're thrillers set in the sometimes murky world of international pharmaceutical manufacturing. And they're set all around the world, whereas these are just in Devon.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone who has asked questions, commented. I missed, I think this was Malcolm earlier, X plus 1, X being the present number of murders, is how many murders they can get away with in Midsummer and everywhere else. Absolutely brilliant, really made me chuckle. And we've had lots of thank yous already. Elizabeth, I'm so thrilled that I got to step in for Kaz tonight. I've had a brilliant hour. Loved the book, absolutely brilliant book. And I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
I'd love to, yes. Thank you very much for inviting me. I've had a great time.
Now let's see if I can figure out how to turn the stream off on the new software. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.